Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today's case takes us to Japan, a country that is world-renowned for its safety. It's a place where it's normal to see little kids taking the subway by themselves, a place where people feel so secure that they often leave their doors unlocked. But this story is about how that profound sense of safety was completely and utterly broken. If you're a parent, this case is going to get to you. This is the tragic story of Lê Thị Nhật Linh, a little girl who vanished one morning on her short walk to school. It's also about the disgusting betrayal by a person who was trusted with the very safety of the town's most vulnerable people. The perpetrator, who should have been someone who protected children, was instead a predator, a wolf in sheep's clothing. So stick with me because you're not going to believe who was responsible. If you're new here, this is what we do. We get into many true crime cases and we try to make sense of it together. If that sounds like your kind of thing and you want to be part of our little community here, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. It honestly also makes a huge difference if you could just hit that like button too. That's the best way to help the channel out and just get these stories out there. Also, for those of you who want to be a bigger part of what we do on here, you should think about becoming a channel member. When you join, you get to be in our private Discord server, and that's where the conversation really goes down. We can talk more about these cases. You can throw out your theories, tell me what cases I should cover next. We can just chat and get to know each other. It's a really great group of people, so if that sounds cool to you, just click the join button below this video. All right, let's jump into the case. So let's start with the family at the heart of this. Lê Thị Nhật Linh was just 9 years old, a third grader who lived with her dad, Lian Hao, and her mom, Nguyen Thi Nguyen, and her little 3-year-old brother. Linh was born in Vietnam in 2008 and moved to Japan with her parents when she was just 3 years old. They were a Vietnamese family who had moved from their home village in Hưng Yên province to Japan. And you have to assume that they did it for the same reasons so many families do, for a better life, and most of all, for a safe place to raise their kids. And honestly, they couldn't have picked a better spot on paper. Japan is famous for being incredibly safe. In 2017, the year this all went down, Japan's homicide rate was something like 0.24 per 100,000 people. So to put that in perspective, the rate in the US that same year was 5.3. So that's insanely low, one of the lowest in the world. Violent crime is so rare over there that when it does happen, it's a massive shock to everyone. This feeling of safety creates this amazing culture of independence for kids that you just don't see in a lot of other places. It's completely normal to see kids as young as 5 or 6 walking to school by themselves or even riding the subway alone. And it's not because the parents are neglectful, it's because the whole society is basically a safety net. It's kind of like this silent agreement between the community members. We don't mess with each other so that everyone is safe. For Linh, like millions of other Japanese children, walking to school was a rite of passage. It was a normal part of her daily routine. And to understand this case, you really have to understand the culture around this. So in Japan, schools are usually a short walk from home. Local volunteers and school staff literally stand on street corners when kids are walking to and from school to keep an eye on things. There are even designated school routes that are planned out to be the safest, most visible paths. So for example, there could be many shortcuts through alleys, for example, but the kids would have to walk on the main road instead, even if it's a longer route, just for their safety and visibility. It's also common for Japanese children to go to the park or to activities after school without a parent or guardian. The freedom that these kids have is largely due to the support of the local people in the area. Teams of volunteers are put together by parents and residents to patrol parks, streets, and other places where children might be playing, walking, to make sure the area is safe and that there is no, weird people around. And if they find anything that seems dangerous, they will report it to the school or the police. So regular patrols help to prevent crime in the area, creating this environment in which children can walk around with peace of mind. They even have this thing called the 110 house scheme, where local shops and homes put up a sign that basically says, if you're a kid and you're in trouble, you can run in here for help. The 110 refers to the police emergency number in Japan, and registered 110 houses display this sign, identifying them as places where children can go if they need help, and then the police can be called. I tried to find out more about this. I was wondering if anybody can just get this sign, but it seems like these signs are more so put up at trusted, identifiable places like post offices and grocery stores. So when Lynn's parents let her walk to school, they were just being normal parents in their neighborhood. They were trusting the system, a system that had every reason to be trusted. They had moved across the world and put their faith in this promise of a safe community where their daughter could have a bit of freedom. They thought they'd found their safe haven. From the few accounts we do have, Lynn was a wonderful 9-year-old girl. A neighbor remembers her as being very honest and really cute. She was social and loved to play with her friends in the neighborhood during summer vacation. And despite her really young age, she was already bilingual and incredibly bright. Her Japanese was so good that she would often act as a little interpreter for her mother, Nguyen, who was still learning the language. There's a photo of her at 5 years old taken during a family trip to the Tokyo Tower where she's wearing this little navy blue hat and she's smiling up at the camera. She's just so cute, and it's just a picture of pure, unfiltered childhood joy. Her mom, Nguyen, said Lynn always talks about what good people the Japanese are, and these words would soon take on this horrifying irony. It posted a terrifying question. If a child isn't safe walking to school in Japan, is anywhere truly safe? And worse, what happens when the threat isn't an outsider, but someone from inside the safety net itself? Friday, March 24th, 2017 should have been a great day for Lynn. It was the last day of school before spring break, and at around 8 in the morning, Lynn said goodbye to her family. She was dressed in her pink pants, a gray jacket. She put on her bright red backpack, a yellow hat, and walked out the door of her home in Matsudo, a city in the Chiba prefecture. Her parents spend most of their days working hard to create a great life for their 2 children, and the walk to her school, Mutsumi Daini Elementary, was a short trip, a trip she'd made hundreds of times. Security camera footage captured her just after she left her home. She was just a little girl on her way to school, completely unaware of the danger that was waiting for her. She never made it. The first sign that something was wrong came a little while later when a teacher from the school called Lynn's family. Lynn hadn't made it to class. Can you imagine that phone call, guys? Pure panic. Her parents knew she left. They knew the walk was short. For her to just disappear was impossible in their minds. They called the police immediately and a massive search kicked off. For 2 days straight, the family, the police, and the whole community searched everywhere, hoping they'd find Lynn hiding somewhere. Maybe she got hurt and she was stuck somewhere, or that there was just some simple explanation. But we all know that's usually not the case. Police at this point concluded that someone had abducted Lynn on her short walk to school, but there was still hope that she would be found safe. But on the morning of Sunday, March 26th, that hope was just broken. Around 6:45 a.m., a man was out fishing along the Tone River in the next city over, Abiko, when he saw something in the grass near a drainage ditch. It was Lynn. The scene was sick. Her little body was completely naked, just left there. None of her clothes or personal items like her backpack or hat were found nearby. The spot was about 10 to 12 kilometers from her house, which told police one thing right away. She hadn't just wandered off. She had been taken. Her dad, Hao, had to go to the scene and do the one thing no parent should ever have to do: identify his own child's body. The safe community her family had moved for had become the scene of their worst nightmare. Everyone was in shock, and the police knew that they had a monster on the loose. Only a monster could do this to a child. What they didn't know was that the monster was right there among them, pretending to be just as shocked as everyone else. The state of Lynn's body told a story of a violent and terrifying end. Guys, the official cause of death was determined to be asphyxiation due to strangulation based on the horrific marks found on her neck, but that wasn't all. She also suffered an injury to her head, an injury on her wrist, and there were scratches all over her body, suggesting a struggle. That little tiny 9-year-old fought back. The autopsy suggested that she had been killed not long after she was kidnapped. The deliberate actions of the killer were so vile, dumping her body so far from where she was taking and stripping her of all her clothing and personal items are just classic tactics used to deter an investigation. It's done to make identification harder and to remove potential forensic evidence like fibers from clothing or the killer's car. This wasn't a crime of passion or a panicked mistake. This was the work of someone cold, calculated, and methodical. This was the work of a predator. The discovery of Lynn's body, launched a massive police investigation. The community was on edge and the pressure to find the person responsible was high. Investigators worked around the clock, and just under 3 weeks later, on April 14th, 2017, they made an arrest. Now, the arrest itself was shocking and sickening. The person they arrested wasn't just some random creep. It was Yasumasa Shibuya. And who was Yasumasa? He was a 46-year-old real estate salesman who lived just 300 meters down the street from Lynn's family. He wasn't just some random drifter or a known criminal. Are you ready? Yasumasa was the head of the Parent-Teacher Association at Lynn's school. He knew Lynn. And get this, he was an active volunteer in the Neighborhood Watch program. This was a man who volunteered to stand on the street and watch over the children to protect them. He was literally the designated watchman of the community. The news was baffling. The man entrusted to protect the children was now accused of being the one who hunted them. The betrayal is just absolute. This guy had the perfect cover. His involvement in school safety wasn't just because he was a concerned citizen. It gave him a hunting strategy. It gave him access. It let him learn the kids' routines. And most importantly, it earned him the trust of every single person in that neighborhood. Makes me so sick and so angry. While the community was reeling from the betrayal, the police were building an ironclad case based on a mountain of forensic evidence. The science was undeniable and it all pointed directly at Yasumasa. When they arrested him, he clammed up completely. He shut his mouth. He refused to say a word. No confession, no explanation, nothing. But he didn't have to talk. The forensic evidence was screaming. First, they found Yasumasa's DNA on Lynn's body. That's the direct link. But it gets worse. They searched his car and found bloodstains. The DNA from that blood was a direct match to Lynn. They also found her hair in his car, and this placed Lynn directly in his car. And to top it all off, his DNA was also found on some of Lynn's belongings that were eventually recovered. It was a forensic slam dunk. His DNA on her DNA in his car, there was no doubt. The community's trusted guardian, the man they put in charge of keeping their kids safe, was the monster who had stolen one of them. Not only stolen, but took her life. The case was so shocking and had such serious implications that the response went all the way to the top levels of government. This wasn't just treated as a local murder, it became a diplomatic incident. On the very day Yasumasa was arrested, April 14th, Japan's foreign minister Fumio Kishida personally met with a visiting Vietnamese government minister to inform him of the arrest and to extend his deepest condolences on behalf of the nation. At the same time, the Japanese ambassador to Vietnam, Umeda Kunio, met with her father Hao and offered a formal, heartfelt apology for what had happened to his daughter on Japanese soil. This kind of high-level diplomatic response is not typical for a criminal investigation. It just shows how seriously Japan took this crime. They understood that this wasn't just about one man's horrific actions. It was about a potential stain on the country's reputation for safety and its strong relationship with Vietnam. Many Japanese citizens even sent letters to the Vietnamese embassy expressing their sorrow and their hope that this one terrible act wouldn't damage the friendship between their two countries. The arrest was made, the evidence was clear, and now Lynn's family had to prepare for the next grueling chapter, the fight for justice in the courtroom. The trial of Yasumasa Shibuya started at the Chiba District Court on June 4th, 2018, and it was a huge deal. More than 400 people lined up outside the courthouse hoping to get one of the 60 seats available to the public. The prosecutors went hard, calling Yasumasa's crime cold-blooded, heinous, and cruel, and demanding the death penalty for him, which is the most severe punishment they have in Japan and most countries. But Yasumasa, through the whole thing, just stuck to his story that he was innocent. He even had the nerve to bow to the judges and ask them to make a fair decision. The legal battle that followed was, a long and emotionally draining ordeal for Lynn's family, stretching out over 4 painful years. It was a fight led by her father, Hao, who became the public face of a family desperate for justice. The prosecution laid out its case. They presented the clear forensic evidence, the DNA, the blood, the hair, and painted a picture of a monstrous crime. They argued that Yasumasa had abducted Lin in his vehicle, SA'd her, and then strangled her to death before abandoning her little body. They described his actions as cold-blooded, heinous, cruel, sick, and demanded the most severe punishment available. They wanted him to die. Through it all, Yasumasa remained defiant. He pleaded not guilty to all charges. His defense team argued that he was innocent and even claimed that the evidence presented by the prosecutors was completely fabricated. They just made it up. The DNA evidence, they made it up, apparently. Go figure. But despite all of that, on July 6th, 2018, the court delivered its verdict. The judges found Yasumasa Shibuya guilty of the murder of Lê Thị Lin, but they did not sentence him to death. Instead, he was sentenced to life in prison, which honestly shocked the entire community. For Lin's family and for the prosecutors, a life sentence was just not enough. It felt like a failure of justice. They immediately announced that they would appeal the decision, continuing their push for the death penalty. Howe refused to give up. He even launched a campaign to collect signatures from the public to petition the court for a harsher sentence. You'd see Lin's dad in the news, always holding a picture of his daughter, going to every single court date and turning all that pain into a public campaign for the death penalty for the killer of his daughter. He fought as hard as any dad could. Yasumasa's lawyers also appealed in September of 2019, but they tried a different angle. They argued that the first DNA sample the police got, which came from some cigarette butts they collected from his condo's garbage site, was taken illegally without a warrant. So their whole argument was that if the first piece of evidence was illegal, then everything that came after it should be thrown out and Yasumasa should just walk free. The whole appeal process took years. So finally, on March 23rd, 2021, the Tokyo High Court made its decision. It shut down the defense's argument, saying that taking stuff from an unlocked common garbage area was totally legal. But in the same breath, it also shut down the appeal from the prosecution and Lin's family. The court stuck with the original sentence, life in prison. A month later, the prosecutors announced that they wouldn't take it any higher to the Supreme Court in Japan. And that was it. The life sentence was final. After 4 long years of fighting, of reliving the worst moments of his life in courtrooms, Howe's battle was over. In a statement that really shows his heartbreak and disappointment, he said that the 4 years that he had spent fighting in the courts had now just become meaningless to him. It just goes to show you how different justice can look to different people. For the legal system in Japan, life in prison meant a dangerous guy was off the streets for good. But for Howe, it felt like a total failure. For him, justice wasn't just about locking the killer away, it was about an eye for an eye. Later, a civil lawsuit ordered Yasumasa to pay the family 70 million Japanese yen, which is like over $600,000. But you know that no amount of money could ever make up for that feeling of justice being denied. I actually never understand getting paid for a murder. I understand in some situations where the person was like the breadwinner of the family or things like that. But for a child, I think it's more so the principle and another way to make the killer pay, pun intended. You know, it's kind of weird. Like that money is never going to, but I guess the money is more so about like, okay, I've been in court all these years. I couldn't work, like just to survive and not have to think about, yeah, that's what it is, guys. I'm an idiot. Don't worry about me. So what do we take away from a story like this? The first most difficult question is always, could it have been prevented? And in this case, the answer is just so frustrating. The very system designed to prevent this kind of thing was the exact system the killer used to his advantage. How do you possibly screen for a monster who is so good at pretending to be a protector? The Japanese model of community safety is amazing because it gives kids this incredible freedom and trust in other people. But this case showed its one massive flaw, an insider threat. When the guy watching the flock is actually a wolf, what chance does anyone have? I think what's wild is that how long was Yasumasa eyeing Lin off? You know, if he was one of the watchmen and he had seen her either going to school or coming back from school or both, like how long had he been thinking about this? How long had he been looking at her, thinking about what he wanted to do to her? Like sometimes even just people eyeing your kids it's so sick that there are people like that out there. You know what I mean? Like you never know who, if you're walking with your kids, you never know who the hell is looking at your kid in a weird way. And that's why it's so important not to put kids on social media. Like I really struggle with that because I get like you want to share how cute your kids are and things like that, but you really shouldn't. You really shouldn't, because who knows how people are looking at your children. And if you're like somebody who's a big influencer, imagine like millions of people looking at your kids and you don't know who's got bad intent. Sick. But at the same time, I don't think we should discount the system Japan has built. I mean, looking at it, coming from a, I guess, culture where villages don't raise our kids, moms and dads are raising kids while working full-time jobs and still doing it all. And nowadays, we rarely have the help of grandparents because they themselves are working. And a lot of grandparents don't feel the need to help their kids anymore because they're out there living their own lives, you know? It's wild. So I think that the fact that they've even built this system is something to look at in a positive way. It's with good intention. For me personally, when my kids have kids, I'm going to be there. Not only for those grandbabies, but for my kids. You know, I will be their village because that's just not the culture that's common these days. Lin's murder sent a shockwave through Japan. It made people question everything they thought they knew about safety and who they could trust in their own communities. This case was so huge, it got attention from, you know, the highest levels of government in the country. Even the prime minister at the time, Shinzo Abe, he offered his own personal condolences to the family. It was like an admission that this wasn't just a random common crime. It was a deep wound to the country's reputation as a safe place. You know, it really hurt them. While Japan has made school safety reforms over the years, mostly for like disasters and things like that, it's not really clear if this case led to any specific changes in how they screen volunteers for these school watch programs. I did see that on the streets in Japan, there are designated signs for children walking to alert other drivers to, you know, always be aware that there could be kids around. Also, Japan is always doing things first. I saw that kids are using cell phones that are specifically made for them. These phones, they don't have any internet-enabled apps, just simple functions, I believe, just like texting and calling, and they can only be sent to contacts that the parents put on the phone. There's features like GPS tracking and a security buzzer that shoots out this loud noise if there's any danger. It also doesn't easily break, and there's absolutely no social media. So this helps with monitoring at times when there are no community volunteers on the streets or if they go out after school, which I think is really great. But again, not foolproof, but nothing is really. And, you know, a lot of people might be like, you just need to spend time with your kids and you need to do it. But I think in Japan, I could be wrong, but I think they work really long hours. And I believe the cost of living is high there. So it's like, you know, we can judge other parents for not being at home with their kids, but not everyone is lucky enough to do so. Like, I feel so guilty when I have to work and I'm working from home most of the time. So I still feel incredibly guilty. I can't imagine how guilty I would feel if I had to go and work a 9 to 5 in an office and not be with my kids all the time, you know? So I feel like we shouldn't make other parents feel guilty for what they feel they have to do. And finally, you're left with the family. Their grief is just on another level. They had to fly Lin's body back to Vietnam for the funeral, where hundreds of people from their home village came to mourn with them. In the end, they got a civil judgment and they saw their daughter's killer put away for the rest of his life, but they never really got the justice they truly wanted. They left their home for a safer life only to have their entire world destroyed by the worst kind of betrayal imaginable. They were left to fight this lonely battle in a foreign country for a kind of justice that, in their eyes, never really came. So what could have been done differently to prevent this? I always ask this at the end of my videos, but it's a question that really haunts this case and there are no easy answers. Japan's safety systems are, by any measure, some of the best in the world, but this case, you know, obviously highlights a terrifying reality that no system is foolproof against a determined predator, a monster who works their way into a position of trust and authority, and it happens in many types of cases. Maybe more strict background checks for volunteers could be implemented. Maybe they don't get to kind of work the same shifts all the time. They swap it out, but it's difficult to screen for evil that hides behind, you know, a friendly face and a helpful hand. In the end, this is a story with no winners, only loss. A family that lost a beloved daughter and sister, a community that lost its sense of security, and a nation that was forced to confront the chilling fact that evil can flourish even in the most peaceful of places. It's important that we remember Lin, not just as a name in a sad headline, but as the little girl who had a bright spark, beautiful face, who loved to play with her friends and help her mom talk to neighbors. She was a 9-year-old girl with her whole life ahead of her, a life that was stolen in the most brutal and betraying way imaginable. As a parent, like I said at the start, this case just will haunt you. It'll make you think about every time your kids aren't with you, every time they're with people who are in a position of trust. And, you got to keep your eyes open. Let me know your thoughts down below, guys. Have you heard of this case before? I can't wait to see you guys in the comments down below, and I will see you in next week's video. Besitos. Bye.